Johnny Depp just dropped a warning that's turning heads across Hollywood, and honestly, it's not what most people expected. He said, "Freedom of speech isn't about protecting what we agree with. It's about protecting what we don't." That's a bold statement.
Especially coming from Johnny, a man who's lived through years of public controversy, courtroom drama, and non-stop headlines. If you've been following the chaos around Johnny Depp, you're definitely not alone. Because what he's saying right now hits deeper than gossip. It's about something that matters to everyone: freedom of speech, truth, and how quick we are to judge people online. In this video, we're going to unpack what Johnny really meant by that statement.
We'll talk about how his experiences shaped it, what people are saying, and why this one quote might just change how you look at celebrity culture. So, grab a drink, settle in, and let's talk about what Johnny Depp's trying to tell the world, because this isn't just another Hollywood soundbite. It's a wake-up call. Let's rewind for a second. Johnny Depp, one of the most recognizable faces in the world, Captain Jack Sparrow himself. The man behind Edward Scissorhands, Sweeney Todd, and so many unforgettable characters. He's known for being mysterious, a little eccentric, and definitely not afraid to speak his mind. But behind that charm and that pirate smile, Johnny's life took a dramatic turn. For years, he was at the center of one of the most publicized court cases in modern entertainment, the defamation battle between him and Amber Heard. It wasn't just a trial. It became a worldwide conversation about truth, reputation, and media power. After the verdict, after the endless news coverage, after the memes and the hashtags, Johnny kind of disappeared for a while. He stayed quiet. No major interviews, no big Hollywood red carpets. It almost felt like he had stepped away to breathe, or maybe to think. And then, out of nowhere, he reappeared. Not to promote a new blockbuster, not to stir more drama, but to say something powerful. He said, "Freedom of speech isn't about protecting what we agree with." And just like that, people started talking again. At first, many thought it was just another celebrity quote. But when you really think about it, this message hits different, especially when it's coming from someone who's been through what Johnny has. He's not just talking about freedom of speech as an abstract idea. He's talking about something he's lived through. He's felt what it's like to be judged before all the facts were in. He's seen how quickly the public can turn, how fast support can vanish, and how dangerous it can be when people decide who's guilty based only on headlines. So when he says that freedom of speech means protecting voices we don't agree with, he's reminding everyone that it's easy to defend the speech we like. It's much harder to defend the speech that challenges us or makes us uncomfortable. And that's the point he's making. Think about it for a second. How often do we say everyone has a right to their opinion, but then get angry the moment someone expresses something we don't like? That's what Johnny's talking about. Freedom of speech isn't meant to make us comfortable. It's meant to make sure even unpopular voices get heard. Now, for Johnny, this isn't just philosophy. It's personal. During his legal battle, he watched as Hollywood, the media, and even fans split into two sides. There was outrage, boycotts, campaigns, and endless debates online. His reputation, something he'd built over decades, was nearly destroyed overnight. Many people believed one side of the story before hearing the other. Some didn't even want to hear it. For a while, Johnny became the face of cancel culture, long before that phrase even became mainstream, and that's why his words now carry weight. When he talks about freedom of speech, he's not just speaking as a celebrity. He's speaking as someone who's been silenced, misunderstood, and judged in the public eye. He's saying if freedom of speech only applies when we agree with someone, then it's not really freedom. It's just selective permission. And that idea, as simple as it sounds, has people divided. Some fans completely agree with him. They say he's standing up for truth, fairness, and real freedom. They see him as someone who survived a media storm and came out wiser on the other side. Others think it's easy for him to say that now, especially since he's rich, successful, and back in control of his image. They argue that not all speech deserves protection, especially when it causes harm, but Johnny's point isn't about defending harmful speech. It's about protecting the principle of open dialogue,
The ability to talk, debate, and disagree without fear of being erased or labeled forever. And honestly, that's something that affects all of us, not just celebrities. In today's world, where social media spreads opinions like wildfire, it's scary how fast people can lose their voice. One post, one old tweet, one rumor, and suddenly, your name is trending for all the wrong reasons. Johnny knows that feeling better than most. So when he speaks up now, people listen. Not just because he's famous, but because he's lived through the fire, and he's still standing. Now here's where things get even more interesting. This quote didn't just come from a random press release. According to insiders close to Depp, it came from a private event where he was speaking about art, storytelling, and truth. He was reportedly reflecting on how modern society has created what he called a fear of expression. Artists, he said, are more afraid than ever to speak freely, to take creative risks, because one wrong word could destroy everything they've built. And that, in his eyes, is dangerous. Depp's always seen art as a reflection of truth, messy, imperfect emotional truth. And he's right. When people start censoring themselves out of fear, the art loses its power. It's easy to think this only happens in Hollywood. But if you've ever hesitated to share your opinion online because you were afraid of being misunderstood or attacked, then you know exactly what he's talking about. Freedom of speech sounds simple until you realize how uncomfortable it can get in practice. And experts agree. Media analysts and ethicists have backed up Depp's point, saying true free speech has to protect even uncomfortable voices. Because the moment we start deciding which opinions are allowed, we lose what makes the concept of freedom meaningful. One analyst put it perfectly: true freedom of speech has to protect even the voices that make us uneasy. Otherwise, it's not freedom at all. That line really sticks, doesn't it? It makes you wonder, how many people do we silence just because we don't like what they say? How many stories never get told because someone's too afraid to tell them? And for Johnny, those questions aren't hypothetical. He's been on the receiving end of silence. After his trial, major studios stopped working with him. Some brands dropped him. He lost roles he'd spent years shaping. Overnight, his name went from celebrated to controversial. But instead of disappearing for good, he started rebuilding, quietly, on his own terms. He began working on smaller projects, independent films and music collaborations. He even directed a film recently, returning to the creative side of storytelling that he's always loved, and through all of it, his tone has changed. He's no longer shouting to defend himself. He's speaking calmly, thoughtfully about bigger ideas: truth, art, expression, and freedom. It's a reminder that some of the most powerful statements aren't screamed in anger. They're whispered after reflection. Now, what's really fascinating is that there are rumors, yes, you heard that right, that Johnny might be teaming up with another big Hollywood name for a documentary about this exact topic: free speech, media control, and cancel culture. If that's true, it could be one of the most talked about projects of his career, because love him or hate him, Johnny Depp has lived through what most people fear: losing everything because of what others think or say about you, and now he's turning that experience into something bigger. A conversation about truth and what it means to have a voice. The reaction online has been all over the place. Some people call him brave for speaking up again. Others roll their eyes, saying, "Here we go, another celebrity lecture." But if you strip away the fame, what's left is a message that applies to everyone. Real freedom of speech means accepting that not everyone will share your view. And that's okay. In fact, that's the whole point. If we only protect the speech we agree with, then we're not really protecting freedom. We're protecting comfort. And comfort has never been the goal of progress. Real growth almost always comes from discomfort. It comes from moments when people dare to challenge what everyone else accepts as normal. It's uncomfortable conversations that spark awareness, change laws, and open minds. Think about it. Every major turning point in history started with someone who refused to stay silent, even when the world told them to shut up. The civil rights movement didn't begin with people who wanted to keep things polite. It began with people who were tired of being told their voices didn't matter. Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, Malcolm X, They spoke truth in a time when their truth was unwelcome. People called them troublemakers. They were criticized, attacked, and even jailed, but their words forced the world to confront injustice. It was the same for the women who fought for equality. When women first demanded the right to vote, to work, to be seen as equals, they were mocked. They were labeled as radicals, unladylike, even dangerous.
But their persistence changed everything. The world evolved because they refused to be silenced. They spoke up, even when people didn't like what they had to say. And it's not just politics. The art world tells the same story. Every major artistic revolution came from people who broke the rules.
Painters, musicians, writers, they all used their art to say what others were afraid to say out loud. Think about Bob Dylan's protest songs, Picasso's chaotic war paintings, or filmmakers who pushed boundaries to show uncomfortable truths.
None of that came from playing it safe. It came from having the courage to offend, to question, and to provoke thought. That's what Johnny's talking about when he mentions freedom of speech. It's not about shouting into an echo chamber where everyone claps in agreement. It's about being brave enough to say something that might make people pause, argue, or even walk away, and still believing that your right to speak matters. When we only protect the voices we like, we create a world where everyone is scared to say anything real. We turn honesty into a risk and creativity into a gamble. People start filtering themselves, choosing every word carefully to avoid backlash.
But that kind of world doesn't grow. It just stagnates. Because when no one wants to upset anyone, no one tells the truth anymore. And maybe that's why Johnny's words feel so relevant right now. He's lived through a time when public opinion was louder than the facts.
He saw what happens when narratives get twisted, and when people are punished not just for what they do, but for what others think they did. So when he talks about protecting even the speech we disagree with, it comes from experience, from knowing how it feels to be silenced, misunderstood, or erased. Freedom of speech isn't supposed to be comfortable. It's supposed to be a safeguard for all voices, even the ones we don't like. Because if we only defend the easy voices, who defends the difficult ones when they need it most? That's why throughout history, the people who made real change weren't the ones who played it safe. They were the ones who risked being hated, canceled, or cast out. They knew that truth doesn't survive if it's only allowed when it's convenient, and Johnny, in his own way, seems to be reminding us of that. He's saying that we can't pick and choose who deserves a voice, because if we start doing that, we're no longer living in a world of freedom, we're living in a world of approval. Real progress happens when people are allowed to challenge the system, not when they're forced to fit into it. It happens when we listen, even when we don't like what we hear. It happens when society is strong enough to hold disagreement without falling apart. So maybe Johnny's message isn't just about him. Maybe it's about all of us. About remembering that free speech isn't supposed to be comfortable. It's supposed to be human. It's supposed to make us think, question, and sometimes even argue. Because through that tension, that push and pull of ideas, that's where understanding begins. And maybe that's what progress really is. Not silence, not comfort, but the willingness to listen, to speak, and to keep the conversation going, even when it's hard. That art, truth, and freedom come with risk. And that silence, even when it feels safe, can be more dangerous than words we don't like. So what do you think? Is Johnny Depp right? Should freedom of speech protect even the voices we disagree with? Or are there lines that should never be crossed? It's a tough question, and that's exactly why it's worth asking. Everyone has their own answer, and that's what makes conversations like this so important. If you have thoughts, drop them in the comments. I'd really love to know how you feel about it, whether you agree with Johnny or not. And if you found this story interesting, there's another video you'll definitely want to check out next. It's all about how celebrities are fighting back against cancel culture and rebuilding their image in ways no one saw coming. It connects perfectly with what Johnny's talking about here, and I promise it'll give you a whole new perspective on how fame, freedom, and reputation really work in today's world. Before you go, don't forget to hit like if you enjoyed this video. It helps the channel grow and reach more people who love deep dives like this. And if you're new here, hit subscribe so you don't miss any future videos, Because let's be honest, Hollywood drama never sleeps. And neither do we when it comes to bringing you the real stories behind the headlines. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the loudest statements aren't shouted. They're spoken quietly by people who've already lived through the chaos. Johnny Depp's words aren't just about Hollywood. They're about us, about how we talk, how we listen, and how we decide what deserves to be heard. And whether you agree with him or not, you can't deny, he's got the world talking again.